every emotion has an underlying need. So if you feel a pleasant emotion, it's likely that a need has been met. And if you feel an unpleasant emotion like disappointed, is this because of a need of respect, of support, of understanding? And without making that connection, it's really hard to really address it. Many people think just in black and white, like, what do I do to feel like good and what makes me feel bad? And the reality is that managing emotions is not the same depending which emotion. So a coping strategy that may serve you well when you are very anxious or angry may not serve you well when you are depressed, disappointed. So we have created characters for each of the responses. So for example, for the fight response, we have created the little tiger that is constantly judging others or is hyper vigilant. What it does and why we've developed the characters is for them to inspire compassion. Because most of the time we are very critical about how to respond to stress. And we start in a negative loop about like, how could I respond this way? How could I do this? This makes me be a bad person. And there is a whole lot of inner dialogue that is not actually helping you become better.
Morgane, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's lovely to have you on the show.
Nice for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to chatting with you. And before we get started, though, I'd like to ask the same question I ask all my guests, and that's if you had to pick one well-being boosting strategy, what would it be and why?
I would say spending time outside, especially in the sun and around nature, hearing the wind blow in your face. I would say that will be the main strategy, especially with a lot of people like me working mainly remotely.
I love that. Great tip. Anybody can do it.
Easy
So
reach.
that's wonderful. Yes. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about your background and how you got interested in well-being.
Sure, I'm a user experience designer. I did my master in design and technology at Parsons, the new school, and I got really interested. UX has always had a little psychology realm in it, but my real interest is through my own history with anxiety. And I've been very lucky because I found a really good therapist that taught me a lot of psychoeducation, very needed psychoeducation that really changed the way I experience my emotions and also how I had my own thought relationships. So I'm a user experience, very visual person. And I remember she was just like seeing like all these psychoeducation charts, black and white, very ugly, but very insightful. So I remember thinking like, wow, this is so important information. What it could be in colors, with characters, with narrative, could make it easier with easier language. So this inspired my whole journey. I had a user experience agency before, so I was used to building products for clients. But I was, for one time, really inspired on building a product on my own with my team. And yes, that was how it all started.
Well, that ties in perfectly to your work and what we're mainly talking about here, which is Equanima. I think I pronounced that correctly.
Yes.
So tell us about Equanima, this app that you developed that does all the things you just talked about and makes psychology colorful and beautiful.
Sure. So one of the things that we notice, especially now with the rise of AI, is that a lot of mental health apps are going into the AI companionship realm. And I see, especially for Generation Z and millennials, that this could be potentially problematic because, especially for Gen Z, they are still building their social skills. And with the pandemic and everything that happened, it's you ask a 15-year-old, hey, you have a chatbot 24/7, reliable, no conflict, no issues, or you can go outside, you can try to find friends, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be vulnerability, and it may seem like an easy choice. However, in all the research around happiness, building quality relationships in life is the main fundamental factor for happiness. So how can we help this younger generation build those quality relationships? And one of the foundings was that it all becomes about the language. Our language is a framework for how we understand our experience and how we express to others. However, we see that many people have a very limited vocabulary. They say like, hey, I feel awful, I feel great, like very basic ways of expressing emotions. And that was where we wanted to start, how we can build a better language so that people understand. So, for example, if I say to you, I feel humiliated, is this an emotion?
Great question. I would say no, but it depends.
It's interesting. A lot of people will also get confused about this kind of words because when I say I feel humiliated, I feel insulted, I feel abandoned, I feel mistreated, these all are words that carry blame and judgment. They have a lot to do with another person's behavior toward me and also about my feelings, but mainly about other people's behavior. And when we use these words in our daily communication, we actually are blocking empathy, are blocking the capability of people understanding ourselves because they're most likely gonna get defensive, gonna get reactive, gonna say like, I didn't abandon you, I didn't humiliate you, I didn't mistreat you. So many people when they start to ask about questions about the language, they say like, maybe it's not as easy as I thought talking about feelings. And another important part is that every emotion has an underlying need. So if you feel a pleasant emotion, it's likely that a need has been met. And if you feel an unpleasant emotion like disappointed, is this because of a need of respect, of support, of understanding? And without making that connection, it's really hard to really address it. So you have a lot of these apps that are just giving you meditation to distress, to some general coping strategies, but we didn't see any app that actually helps you understand why are you feeling the way that you're feeling, what is the need behind, if there are any body signals attached to this emotion, and to have a more clear understanding of what to do to actually fulfill those needs. So with our app, we use AI to help you deconstruct. So you can tell the app like, hey, I had a fight with my boss, I feel terrible. um, the AI will propose different feelings, influences, needs, body signals, and you can validate those. And they go into an emotional data set that can tell you over a year, you know what, or over a month, over a week, the 90% of the times that you felt disappointed, it was because of a need of connection. Here are some actionable steps to get you more connection into your life. So basically, building a whole tool of structured language for you to understand yourself better and to communicate better to others as well.
That is fascinating and so helpful because, as you said, most of the apps are like, do all the things. And that does help. It does help. But figuring out why you're having the negative experiences in the first place makes you not even necessarily need the strategies because you aren't having those feeling response patterns anymore. So super cool. I'm curious, how long does it take for a person, or like how many inputs do you need in order to give them these personal recommendations?
So we need five inputs in order to start generating the analytics. But with each of these inputs, you already are getting some clear guidance. So in any of these mood entries, we also have a reflection flow so that you can actually reflect about those needs and how you can fulfill those needs. So we also have emotional education lessons in the Duolingo style about these important things on managing emotions, understanding emotions. And we use a lot the circumflex model of emotion. So understanding what is a high arousal emotion, what is a low arousal emotion. Because one of the things about managing emotions is that many people think just in black and white, like what do I do to feel like good and what makes me feel bad. And the reality is that managing emotions is not the same depending which emotion. So a coping strategy that may serve you well when you are very anxious or angry may not serve you well when you are depressed, disappointed. It's about understanding how you react when you are high arousal, when you are low arousal, and what actually are the influences that get you in the pleasant low arousal or the pleasant high arousal. So excited and energized, or relaxed and calm. And once people understand that, oh, actually, I need to go opposite. If I'm angry or anxious or fearful, let's do things that make me calm and relax. And if I'm disappointed, sad, ashamed, let's do something that energizes me, like listening to upbeat music or doing some exercise. So it's about giving them a framework to also understand how emotions relate to each other.
That's fascinating. I tried this app that no longer exists anymore a few years ago where I did something similar to this. And it turned out that creativity was the number one predictor of my happiness, which wasn't what I expected at all. I thought it would be like good diet or getting outside. And I was like, oh my God, if I could just be like a little creative every day, then I would be blissful all the time. And now as you can see behind me, am creative a lot more than I used to be. So super fascinating. Are there how do you educate people as to like what the different needs are? Like, are you asking them what their need is? How are you figuring out what their need is that predicts their emotion or their behavior?
So we use AI. We have a particular AI structure that understands a framework of needs and can match the needs based on the influences that you've selected on the particular situation. And we also have a list of needs to help you understand what are those. We also have developed part of the prototype of our app was a low fidelity prototype where we actually did all this in cards. And when doing the cards, because it was very visual with characters and everything, we actually we were the feedback was really really good. So we decided to actually build also a card game that is now found on Amazon US and also in our e-commerce. And
And what's that called so people can look that up?
the Emotional Intelligence Toolkit by
Super.
Equanima. Mhm. Yes, and it's about understanding in a more visual way these particular concepts like needs, body signal, how they relate to each other, and also triggered response, which is actually a very important topic that is often not looked into emotional intelligence. I'm sure that you heard about the fight and flight response.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what we want people to understand is that these trigger responses are based on our survival instincts. So whenever we have stress or we see any threatening thing, it's normal that our body goes into a specific pattern. So we have created characters for each of the responses. So, for example, for the fight response, we have created the little tiger that is constantly judging others, or is hyper vigilant, or maybe is a passive aggressive fight response. And then we've created also for the flight response, which is anything that gives us a distance from our threat. So digital dependency, any sort of addiction, any sort of compulsive behavior like compulsive shopping. This is our little seagull for the flight. We also have our deer for the freeze. Maybe you have some sort of decision paralysis. We also have the submit response, which is less understood. Our little bunny constantly seeking validation. And this is the type of response where we want to appease the threat in order to avoid it. So any sort of people pleasing behavior, self-sacrificing behavior. And then we have the attached response, which is our little koala, which I cannot find right now, but I will in a moment. And this about the clinginess, about seeking for a protector, about don't leave me, please, like stay with me. This is our little koala. And what it does and why we've developed the characters is for them to inspire compassion, because most of the time we are very critical about how to respond to stress. And we start in a negative loop about like, how could I respond this way? How could I do this? This makes me be a bad person. And there is a whole lot of inner dialogue that is not actually helping you become better. So what we do with the characters is we let people understand that everybody has a part, a response that is probably learned from childhood to respond in a particular way. So we use a lot of metaphors in the way that we explain things. So one metaphor that we like to say, for example, is about you in your adult self driving the car of your life. So you are in the wheel, you're driving, this is your life happening, and then something happens that reminds you to something that happened in childhood. Maybe not consciously remind you, but and then you have your 5-year-old self in the copilot saying like, I know this, I know what to do about this. And then this 5-year-old is trying to get the wheel of your life, trying to drive your life. And unless you're conscious that this response is happening, you're most likely gonna get these survival response parts going to drive, especially drive how you respond to stress.
Yeah, so true. There's now quite a lot of research on that, where internal family systems is like a really good body of research that shows that we have these individual parts that kind of take us over. So, yes, the adult is ideally driving the car, but that child part takes the wheel and we don't notice it's happening. So, there's so much value in being like, oh, like, why am I acting like this? And reflecting on that and figuring out which part of us is driving the car. So, I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's about also to be curious, because you can look at the part saying like, oh, this part is horrible, is driving my life nuts. But the way that we do it at Equanima with the characters, with the narrative, is actually inviting you to be more curious and less judgmental, because you actually want to know this part, want to know what are those beliefs that is driving this part, what is the when this part started behaving this way, what this part believe about the world. And it may conflict with what you believe, but these parts are so ingrained in ourselves, we're not mindful about them. They really can control and bias all our view of the world. So it's about how do you establish curiosity, and the next time you're triggered, just be very curious about what's happening inside your head. Like, oh, I have this thought. Maybe you can note it down. Maybe you can go through the app and note it there. And this is actually a very important exercise, because unless you know very well your parts are going to be driving your life.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the really cool things about doing this parts work is once you've listened to the part and been curious about it and sort of like figured out what its need is, basically, it often has like a hidden talent. And so there's these like new talents that can emerge once that part of you is not like freaking out about abandonment or whatever it is that they're stressed out about. Have you seen that also?
Definitely, definitely. And also how it changes the relationship with your thoughts. Like now when you have a thought that like, oh, let's just like drink this bottle of wine, and then you're not so critical, but just like saying like, oh, I understand that this is a part, maybe a flight part that doesn't want to deal with this now. And this change of thought in yourself is making you more compassionate to yourself, which is already a big win for your own well-being. And not only that, but when you integrate this and you see another person going into a total triggered response, you don't ask like, hey, what's wrong with this person? You ask, oh, what has happened to this person for them to behave that way? And in so you become less more aware, and also you don't receive it like this trigger response entire. You understand that this has more to do with this person's past probably than you and whatever this person is telling you. So it's also a matter of bringing compassion into our society, to understand that trigger responses most likely come from trauma, and that trauma is something that is not very well understood in this society. Some people understand it as just like one catastrophic event that happened, and it could be that way, but there is much more things that could end up in traumatic history. Like, for example, just having parents that went through their own trauma, or having parents that had issues with their own mental health, or being a kid and not having your fundamental needs met. And those are the needs to be seen, to feel accepted, to feel loved. And when this happens very periodically in life, even if it's not one big traumatic event, it can have lasting effects on your well-being, in your ability to be self-aware, and also to manage your own emotions, which could feel a lot more overwhelming when you experience this sort of not capital T trauma, but minor T trauma.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, because people do think of trauma as these big things, and every single human has trauma. Even if your parents are perfect, you'll have trauma because of just like subtle differences between you and things that like the childhood may have wanted that they didn't get. And even if that's healthy, even if the parent did the right thing. So it's totally normal to have trauma. It's okay. and that's really cool that you address that in that way. Are
Yeah.
there other... Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was going to say that I believe it's really important that we start talking about emotional intelligence and incorporating trauma, because emotional intelligence at the end is your ability to understand and manage your emotion and those from others. And with the definition that we are going here with trauma, and this is the definition of the mental health field as well, is important that we address this, because I see a lot of emotional intelligence education be very surface level. You know, you give some coping things and then you're it. And I would say we need to talk about emotional intelligence in much more deep way, into understanding the things that hinder our ability to understand and manage our emotions, like traumatic events, like not having our needs met as a child, and not being perpetuating this cycle with our own children and so on, which is what we see a lot with legacy trauma around the world.
Yeah, you make a great point. I agree that a lot of the content is surface level. I think of it as kind of like Psych 101 or Self Help 101 for people who are like, once you have a big change in your life as a result of using one of these things, then you're like, oh, like what else is there? And then you can dive deeper into things that I would say are more difficult. Like managing trauma and moving through that is more difficult. That makes the impacts bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like there's a sort of a time and a place for each of these different types of approaches. But
Yeah,
what do you think?
definitely. And one of the things at Equanima, we want to be the door to open to the possibilities, because we have so many narratives in our society that are against us, like no pain, no gain, sleep is for the weak, actually disconnecting us from our body, and also about emotion being a weakness. So there is a lot of narrative there that are really, really not helping us. But when we start to understand that we have normalized pain in this society, we have normalized, no, life is hard, but it shouldn't be. And you can have a path to happiness, and can have a path to feel fulfilled. But obviously, we live in such a rushed, hustle culture society, that everybody's going like success milestone, and then they are 40 in their life and they feel unfulfilled and they don't understand why they feel the way they do. And this is because of this misalignment with what our, mainly our body, which is the main source of wisdom, are trying to tell us about the choices that we made in life, about the people that we have around. So even though Equanima doesn't treat any mental health condition itself. It's a door to ask yourself, okay, how could I improve my life? And if I figure out that I have some trigger responses there that are actually driving the wheel of my life, it's a doorway to say, okay, maybe I can get treatment, maybe I can get more help, because it's about the awareness, and many people don't are not even aware that they are suffering trauma, that they are not handling their emotions the best that they can, and that there is a way to live a more fulfilled life.
Yeah, I totally agree that awareness is really the key behind all of this. And that kind of increases a bit at a time as you dive deeper into trauma. And then you also mentioned bodily awareness. Can you say a bit more about that and how you approach that?
Yeah, we've approached users in our different testing that are like, hey, I have no idea about my emotion. I know if I feel good and bad, and that's it. And for those cases, it's really important to start with the body, because in many cases we have a broken link with this, and our body has different ways of telling us if you feel like a little rough in the stomach, a little headache, a little tense muscles, a little back pain, some sweating hands, if you have your eye going, like twinkling. So it's about understanding the signals that your body shows and being more mindful about it. So the next time you feel like your body doing something weird, or also it could be some urges to do stuff, urge to eat, urge to curl, urge to speak loud, or to speak very quietly, or to not look at the person, look at the ground. So there is a lot of also automatic behaviors that we could be also more mindful, because they are also telling a story about our body being perhaps uncomfortable with a situation, or being uneasy about somebody. So it's about understanding what are those body signals. And we have a few games and lessons about how the high arousal emotions normally feel in the body, how the low arousal emotions usually feel in the body, and in order for them to have a more structured pathway to understanding those signals.
And then you teach them to use those signals to recognize their emotion that they're feeling. Is that right?
Exactly, because with our app, we can actually correlate. We can say like, hey, most of the time that you feel that you lose your appetite is because of anxiety. And we actually have the emotional data
So
to.
many anxiety symptoms.
Yes, definitely, yes. But this is our goal, that people become more body mindful, and in general, that people understand how critical this skill is. We have so many hours of math, of language in school, of things, and for this critical skill that is going to affect every aspect of your life, we don't have enough. And people are either very lucky to find coaches, to find therapists that can guide them in that way. But truth is that it should be more common, more mainstream, so that people have the tools at least to understand basic knowledge about how the physiology works, how the brain works, how you can actually engage your prefrontal cortex to calm your emotions, and so many things that are not taught in school and should be taught.
Yeah, I totally agree, obviously, since we're in the same industry.
Mhm.
Well, you mentioned a bunch of different strategies so far. And if people are able to implement these strategies, what are some of the benefits that they can see in their lives?
I would say more alignment with themselves. People sometimes mistake comfort by happiness. So I see people saying, like, I have a good salary, I have a good wife or husband, and I have all that I should want, and I'm unhappy, but I'm comfortable. So it's a matter of really understanding what is comfort, and what is happiness, truly happiness, and giving, and that people understand that they can actually become more aligned. They can say, okay, what is my need now? What are the needs that are core to my life? Maybe they have a core need of purpose, a core need of connection, of belonging. It's different for different people. Of course, all humans have a drive for connecting with each other, but in particular, people understanding what's your core needs, understanding if your current life is fulfilling or not those needs, is fundamental for you to actually experience a better well-being because you are more aligned with your values.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And so, what are some of the challenges that people might face as they're beginning to learn this skill set? Because it's really, like you said, it's a skill set that's just not taught in school, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say, especially when handling overwhelming emotions. So there is this concept about the window of tolerance. And sometimes we have emotions that are difficult, but we can manage it and we can think over through them and we can apply some sort of coping skills for that, trying to bring the prefrontal cortex, label the emotions, understand if your body is making any signal. But there are some points where emotions can be so overwhelming that you don't even have the prefrontal cortex available. It's like it's switch off. So what do you do then? And it's about understanding also mindfulness techniques, about connecting with the present moment. So perhaps using any of your senses, counting how many green things you see in your room, if you listen to specific noises or sounds, if you can touch soft things, and just anything that could bring your senses back to the present moment. And once you're more in the present moment, then you can actually think a little more about, okay, what are my needs behind this emotion? What are the triggers, if there's any? So it's about understanding also the intensity of the emotion so that you can understand, okay, what way do I go for managing that?
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And if people want to learn more about Equanima and about you, where should they go?
At equanima.io, we have our website. It has different tools. So beside our mobile app, we also have our emotional dictionary, which is an interactive experience for you to understand a whole vocabulary of emotions and understand what are the typical body signals related to specific emotions, what are the typical needs related to specific emotions, idioms, different things that could be helpful for you to start mapping those out. We also have Moodful, a game for differentiating emotion versus interpretation. So what we talk about, words like humiliated, mistreated, and we are about to launch also an emotional intelligence test so that you can understand about bit of what skills you're more skilled with, what skills can you have more help with. And yes, right now we are at a beta version of our app, currently available in our website if you go to the mobile app part for Android or for iOS. And yes, we see ourselves as a platform. We are not about just a product. We are about how can we build different ways that people can engage with this topic, and what does people are actually more finding more value to. So building different products. We also have the motion cards, games that actually a lot of therapists and coaches and educators have found very useful. So yes, you can find very different tools depending on what you're like. If you're more of an analog person, more of a digital person, to actually start this road to self-awareness and emotional growth.
Amazing. And then I actually did want to ask you one more question. Are there any other tips or strategies or um, exercises in your app that you wanted to share that I didn't ask you about?
I would say, well, the reflection flow is one important one. So once you've done with a mood entry, it's about reflecting about those needs, either if those were met needs or unmet needs. And I would say the analytics is very interesting. Once you have five mood entries or more, you don't have the typical, like if any of our audience is used to mood trackers, they are very basic. Normally they have like a great to bad, 1 to 5 like scale, and that's it. And you can maybe put some categories that are just fixed categories for everybody. But actually, our mood tracker is totally different because it understands which emotion is in which arousal level. So you have a breakdown of analytics by arousal. So you have, for example, hey, let's look at your analytics of high arousal pleasant emotions. And you can see all the influences, all the needs around this specific category. And then you can look at the influences for the other categories. So it's a way to understand the framework of emotions in a much more depth and deep way.
I love that. Is that using the circumplex model?
Exactly,
Where,
yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
fascinating. So it's like high arousal, low arousal, positive affect, negative affect, because emotions are not just these singular entities. They're like mixed with space. So wonderful.
Totally, totally, yes. Mhm.
Well, it was lovely chatting with you, and I've really enjoyed our discussion, and I hope to chat with you again soon.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me. It has been a pleasure talking with you. And yes, I would say to our audience, we have also a TikTok channel, equanima.io, and Instagram channel where you can also find our news and also techniques and things that might be of interest.
Wonderful. And I will include the links to all of those things in the description below this video so that viewers can find you easily.
Great. Thank you so much. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day ahead.
Yes, you as well. If you're a coach, consultant, or well-being entrepreneur, grab free science-based content to grow your business by clicking the ebook link in the description below.